Need to hit the go button on YouTube Live. There we go. There you go. Get that going. Now that all the preamble's out of the way. It's up there, YouTube. All right. So here we go. Chapter 5. Chapter 5. As soon as I find my Kindle again. There we go. Backing up. Okay. In the summer of 1927, Wilbur repaired 2 sheds in the farmyard and began moving his books and effects out to them. Soon afterward, Earl Sawyer told the loungers at Osborne's that more carpentry was going on in the Whately farmhouse. Wilbur was closing all the doors and windows on the ground floor, and seemed to be taking out partitions, as he and his grandfather had done upstairs 4 years before. He was living in one of the sheds, and Sawyer thought he seemed unusually worried and tremulous. People generally suspected him of knowing something about his mother's disappearance, and very few ever approached his neighborhood now. His height had increased to more than 7 feet, and showed no signs of ceasing its development. Chapter 5. The following winter brought an event no less strange than Wilbur's first trip outside the Dunwich region. Correspondence with the Widener Library at Harvard, the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, the British Museum, the University of Buenos Aires, and the Library of Miskatonic University of Arkham had failed to get him the loan of a book he desperately wanted. So at length he set out in person, shabby, dirty, bearded, and uncouth of dialect, to consult the copy at Miskatonic, which was the nearest to him geographically. Almost 8 feet tall, and carrying a cheap new valise from Osborne's general store, this dark and goatish gargoyle appeared one day in Arkham in quest of the dreaded volume kept under lock and key at the college library. The hideous Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Azred, in Olaus Wormius's Latin version, as printed in Spain in the 17th century. He had never seen a city before, but had no thought save to find his way to the university grounds, where, indeed, he passed heedlessly by the great white-fanged watchdog that barked with unnatural fury and enmity, and tugged frantically at its stout chain. Wilbur had with him the priceless but imperfect copy of Dr. Dee's English version, which his father had bequeathed him, and upon receiving access to the Latin copy, he at once began to collate the 2 texts with the aim of discovering a certain passage which would have come on the 751st page of his own defective volume. This much he could not civilly refrain from telling the librarian, the same erudite Henry Armitage, A.M., Miskatonic, Ph.D., Princeton, Lit. D. John Hopkins, who had once called at the farm, and who now politely plied him with questions. He was looking, he had to admit, for a kind of formula or incantation containing the frightful name Yog-Sothoth, and it puzzled him to find discrepancies, duplications, and ambiguities which made the matter of determination far from easy. As he copied the formula he finally chose, Dr. Armitage looked involuntarily over his shoulder at the open pages, the left-hand one of which, in the Latin version, contained such monstrous threats to the peace and sanity of the world. "Nor is it to be thought," ran the text, as Armitage mentally translated it, "that man is either the oldest or the last of earth's masters, or that the common bulk of life and substance walks alone. The old ones were, the old ones are, and the old ones shall be. Not in the spaces we know, but between them. They walk serene and primal, undimensioned, and to us unseen. Yog-Sothoth knows the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the gate. Yog-Sothoth is the key and guardian of the gate. Past, present, future, all are one in Yog-Sothoth. He knows where the old ones broke through of old, and where they shall break through again. He knows where they have trod earth's fields, and where they still tread them, and why no one can behold them as they tread. By their smell can men sometimes know them near, but of their semblance can no man know, saving only in the features of those they have begotten on mankind. And of those are there many sorts, differing in likeness from man's truest eidolon to that shape without sight or substance, which is them. They walk unseen and foul in lonely places, where the words have been spoken and the rites howled through at their seasons. The wind gibbers with their voices, and the earth mutters with their consciousness. They bend the forest and crush the city, yet may not forest or city behold the hand that smites. Cadath in the cold waste hath known them. And what man knows Cadath? The ice desert of the south and the sunken isles of ocean hold stones whereon their seal is engraven. But who hath seen the deep frozen city, or the sealed tower long garlanded with seaweed and barnacles? Great Cthulhu is their cousin, yet can he spy them only dimly. Shub-Niggurath, as a foulness shall ye know them. Their hand is at your throats, yet ye see them not. And their habitation is even one with your guarded threshold. Yog-Sothoth is the key to the gate, whereby the spheres meet. Man rules now where they ruled once. They shall soon rule where man rules now. After summer is winter, and after winter summer. They wait patient and potent, for here shall they reign again. Good morning, Rose. Good morning, Skip. Good morning, Harry. Harry Monroe. Dr. Armitage, associating what he was reading with what he had heard of Dunwich and its brooding presences, and of Wilbur Whately and his dim, hideous aura that stretched from a dubious birth to a cloud of probable matricide, felt a wave of fright, as tangible as a draught of the tomb's cold clamminess. The bent, goatish giant before him seemed like the spawn of another planet or dimension, like something only partly of mankind, and linked to black gulfs of essence and entity that stretch like Titan phantasms beyond all spheres of force and matter, space and time. Presently, Wilbur raised his head and began speaking in that strange, resonant fashion which hinted at sound-producing organs unlike the run of mankind's. "Mr. Armitage," he said, "I calculate I've got to take that book home. There's things in it I've got to try under certain conditions that I can't get here, and it'd be a mortal sin to let a red tape rule hold me up. Let me take it along, sir, and I'll swear there won't nobody know the difference. I don't need to tell you I'll take good care of it. It wasn't me that put this D copy in the shape it is." He stopped as he saw firm denial on the librarian's face, and his own goatish features grew crafty. Armitage, half ready to tell him he might make a copy of what parts he needed, thought suddenly of the possible consequences, and checked himself. There was too much responsibility in giving such a being the key to such blasphemous outer spheres. Whately saw how things stood, and tried to answer lightly. "Well, all right, if you feel that way about it. Maybe Harvard won't be so fussy as you be." And without saying more, he rose and strode out of the building, stooping at each doorway. Oh. Excuse me. Armitage heard the savage yelping of the great watchdog, and studied Whately's gorilla-like lope as he crossed the bit of campus visible from the window. He thought of the wild tales he had heard, and recalled the old Sunday stories in the Advertiser. These things, and the lore he had picked up from Dunwich rustics and villagers during his one night there. Unseen things not of earth, or at least not of tri-dimensional earth, rushed fetid and horrible through New England's glens, and brooded obscenely on the mountain tops. Of this he had long felt certain. Now he seemed to sense the close presence of some terrible part of the intruding horror, and to glimpse a hellish advance in the black dominion of the ancient and once passive nightmare. He locked away the Necronomicon with a shudder of disgust, but the room still reeked with an unholy and unidentifiable stench. "As a foulness shall ye know them," he quoted. Yes, the odor was the same as that which had sickened him at the Whately farmhouse less than 3 years before. He thought of Wilbur, goatish and ominous, once again, and laughed mockingly at the village rumors of his parentage. "Inbreeding?" Armitage muttered half aloud to himself. "Great God, what simpletons! Show them Arthur Machen's great god Pan, and they'll think it a common Dunwich scandal. But what thing, what cursed, shapeless influence on or off this three-dimensional earth was Wilbur Whately's father? Born on Candlemas, 9 months after May Eve of 1912, when the talk about the queer earth noises reached clear to Arkham. What walked on the mountains that May night? What rude horror fastened itself on the world in half-human flesh and blood? During the ensuing weeks, Dr. Armitage set about to collect all possible data on Wilbur Whately and the formless presences around Dunwich. He got in communication with Dr. Houghton of Aylesbury, who had attended old Whately in his last illness, and found much to ponder over in the grandfather's last words, as quoted by the physician. A visit to Dunwich village failed to bring out much that was new, but a close survey of the Necronomicon in those parts which Wilbur had sought so avidly seemed to supply new and terrible clues to the nature, methods, and desires of the strange evil so vaguely threatening this planet. Talks with several students of archaic lore in Boston, and letters to many others elsewhere, gave him a growing amazement, which passed slowly through varied degrees of alarm to a state of really acute spiritual fear. As the summer drew on, he felt dimly that something ought to be done about the lurking terrors of the upper Miskatonic Valley, and about the monstrous being known to the human world as Wilbur Whately. About to start a new chapter. So Professor Armitage is a doctor. Dr. Armitage is a little concerned. I would be too. I would be too if a goat man had come into my library demanding to see the lost and missing pages that he doesn't already have of the Necronomicon. Spooky stuff. So far, so good. But let's get on with it. Before we get on with it, I just want to thank you in advance for thank you everyone who's thrown down a host. I really do appreciate those. Lets your friends right here on Mixer know that you enjoy the channel. Yeah, it helps the algorithms out. Who knows how those work? I don't. I'm not smart like that. But they do help. Thank you for those. We had Skip said something, you're not getting notifications. Right next to the follow-unfollow button, there should be a little bell icon, like very similar to YouTube's bell notification thing there. And just double check that that's turned on there. If if this is a channel that you do want notifications for, that's how you toggle them on and off now. And you can go deeper into it on the back end in your dashboard, but that's the basic way to turn them on and off right now. Good morning, Mr. Quinn. Good morning, Mr. Skip. You reckon you'll be all over those pages? Dr. Armitage does suspect. I don't know what he suspects, but he knows the background of what is foretold in the Necronomicon. And it's just weird when someone comes in wanting to know more. Harry Monroe throwing some stickers down. I'm cool with that. Oh, and Zodiac Runner hooked us up with a follow. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So I was going to say, before we pile on in, so thank you for the hosts. I was going to say, during the Rona, while Rona makes the rounds, our mainstream, of course, is here, mixer.com/CarringtonTV, but I'm also restreaming out to YouTube and Periscope and Twitch. So if you're watching on those any of those channels there for our book club, well, hello. And thank you for the follows and YouTube follow that we get out there. I like those. But yeah, come join us on Mixer, mixer.com/CarringtonTV. That's our mainstream. Book club in the morning, gaming in the evening. I don't restream out the gaming, mainly because YouTube will throw copyright strikes at me. And that's and the other thing, okay, before we get into chapter 6, I was also going to say, if you are enjoying the stream, on your page somewhere, you'll have a share this stream with your friends button. It usually looks like the little boop, little arrows, thing like that. So if you click on that, let your friends on Twitter know, let your friends on Facebook know the things that you enjoy watching. Maybe they'll like it too. If they like 2+ hours of live audio book narration 5 days a week, yeah, let them know about it. They might enjoy it. So let's do it. Goat men are moddy buggers. So you get him his page. You'd get him his pages pretty damn quick. All right. Okay. Lady Magritte's got a meeting. Okay, you're going to catch the VOD later. Okay. Right. Oh, very cool. Okay. Let's. Okay, we'll catch you later, Lady Magritte. Have a great day. We're doing good, Zodiac Runner. We are doing really good. This is part 2. This is part. We read part 1 yesterday. But it's okay. I think we'll get caught up. You have creatures and cultists? There's probably a lot of Lovecraft influence in that. Yeah, the extended universe of Lovecraft is quite large, covers a lot of material. Okay, let's get on with it. Let's do it. Chapter 6. The Dunwich horror itself came between Lammas. Okay, let's just look up exactly what Lammas is. Lammas is the first day of August, formerly observed in Britain as a harvest festival during which bread baked from the first crop of wheat was blessed. The Dunwich horror itself came between Lammas and the equinox in 1928, and Dr. Armitage was among those who witnessed its monstrous prologue. He had heard, meanwhile, of Whately's grotesque trip to Cambridge, and of his frantic efforts to borrow or copy from the Necronomicon at the Widener Library. Those efforts had been in vain, since Armitage had issued warnings of the keenest intensity to all librarians having charge of the dreaded volume. Wilbur had been shockingly nervous at Cambridge, anxious for the book, yet almost equally anxious to get home again, as if he feared the results of being away long. Early in August, the half-expected outcome developed, and in the small hours of the third day, Dr. Armitage was awakened suddenly by the wild, fierce cries of the savage watchdog on the college campus. Deep and terrible, the snarling, half-mad growls and barks continued, always in mounting volume, but with hideously significant pauses. Then there rang out a scream from a wholly different throat, such a scream as roused half the sleepers of Arkham and haunted their dreams ever afterward. Such a scream as could come from no being born of earth, or wholly of earth. Yeah, it's like a twin-stick shooter thing, right? Armitage, hastening into some clothes and rushing across the street and lawn to the college buildings, saw that others were ahead of him, and heard the echoes of a burglar alarm still shrilling from the library. An open window showed black and gaping in the moonlight. What had come had indeed completed its entrance, for the barking and the screaming, now fast fading into a mixed low growling and moaning, proceeded unmistakably from within. Some instinct warned Armitage that what was taking place was not a thing for unfortified eyes to see, so he brushed back the crowd with authority as he unlocked the vestibule door. Among the others he saw Professor Warren Rice and Dr. Francis Morgan, men to whom he had told some of his conjectures and misgivings, and these two he motioned to accompany him inside. The inward sounds, except for a watchful, droning whine from the dog, had by this time quite subsided, but Armitage now perceived with a sudden start that a loud chorus of whippoorwills among the shrubbery had commenced a damnably rhythmical piping, as if in unison with the last breaths of a dying man. The building was full of a frightful stench, which Dr. Armitage knew too well, and the three men rushed across the hall to the small genealogical reading room, whence the low whining came. For a second nobody dared to turn on the light. Then Armitage summoned up his courage and snapped the switch. One of the three, it is not certain which, shrieked aloud at what sprawled before them among disordered tables and overturned chairs. Professor Rice declares that he wholly lost consciousness for an instant, though he did not stumble or fall. The thing that lay half-bent on its side in a fetid pool of greenish-yellow ichor and tarry stickiness was almost 9 feet tall, and the dog had torn off all the clothing and some of the skin. It was not quite dead, but twitched silently and spasmodically, while its chest heaved in monstrous unison with the mad piping of the expectant whippoorwills outside. Bits of shoe leather and fragments of apparel were scattered about the room, and just inside the window an empty canvas sack lay where it had evidently been thrown. Near the central desk a revolver had fallen, a dented but undischarged cartridge later explaining why it had not been fired. The thing itself, however, crowded out all other images at the time. It would be trite and not wholly accurate to say that no human pen could describe it, but one may properly say that it could not be vividly visualized by anyone whose ideas of aspect and contour are too closely bound up with the common life forms of this planet and of the three known dimensions. It was partly human, beyond a doubt, with very man-like hands and head, and the goatish, chinless face had the stamp of the Whateleys upon it. But the torso and lower parts of the body were teratologically fabulous, so that only generous clothing could ever have enabled it to walk on earth unchallenged or uneradicated. Above the waist, it was semi-anthropomorphic, though its chest, where the dog's rending paws still rested watchfully, had the leathery, reticulated hide of a crocodile or alligator. The back was piebald with yellow and black, and dimly suggested the squamous covering of certain snakes. Below the waist, though, it was the worst, for here all human resemblance left off, and sheer fantasy began. The skin was thickly covered with coarse black fur, and from the abdomen a score of long, greenish-gray tentacles with red, sucking mouths protruded limply. Their arrangement was odd, and seemed to follow the symmetries of some cosmic geometry unknown to Earth or the solar system. On each of the hips, deep set in a kind of pinkish, ciliated orbit, was what seemed to be a rudimentary eye, whilst in lieu of a tail there depended a kind of trunk or feeler with purple annular markings, and with many evidences of being an underdeveloped mouth or throat. The limbs, save for their black fur, roughly resembled the hind legs of prehistoric Earth's giant saurians, and terminated in ridgy-veined pads that were neither hooves nor claws. When the thing breathed, its tail and tentacles rhythmically changed color, as if from some circulatory cause normal to the non-human side of its ancestry. In the tentacles this was observable as a deepening of the greenish tinge, whilst in the tail it was manifest as a yellowish appearance, which alternated with a sickly grayish white in the spaces between the purple rings. Of genuine blood there was none, only the fetid greenish-yellow ichor which trickled along the painted floor beyond the radius of the stickiness, and left a curious discoloration behind it. Good morning, Rose. What's up? It's a hot day in Texas. It's warming up here, too. As the presence of the three men seemed to rouse the dying thing, it began to mumble. Oh, there we go. There she is, Lady Death, one of the finest mods this side of the Rio Grande. It is. I hope you're setting your school boards straight up there, Lady Death. I hope you're setting them straight. As the presence of the three men seemed to rouse the dying thing, it began to mumble without turning or raising its head. Dr. Armitage made no written record of its mouthings, but asserts confidently that nothing in English was uttered. At first, the syllables defied all correlation with any speech of Earth, but toward the last there came some disjointed fragments, evidently taken from the Necronomicon, that monstrous blasphemy in quest of which the thing had perished. These fragments, as Armitage recalls them, ran something like Ngai Ingaga Bagshogog Iha Yog Sothoth Yog Sothoth they trailed off into nothingness as the whippoorwills shrieked in rhythmical crescendos of unholy anticipation. Good morning, Harry Parry. Then came a halt in the gasping, and the dog raised its head in a long, lugubrious howl. A change came over the yellow, goatish face of the prostrate thing, and the great black eyes fell in appallingly. Outside the window, the shrilling of the whippoorwills had suddenly ceased, and above the murmurs of the gathering crowd there came the sound of a panic-struck whirring and fluttering. Against the moon, vast clouds of feathery watchers rose and raced from sight, frantic at that which they had sought for prey. All at once the dog started up abruptly, gave a frightened bark, and leaped nervously out of the window by which it had entered. A cry rose from the crowd, and Dr. Armitage shouted to the men outside that no one must be admitted till the police or medical examiner came. He was thankful that the windows were just too high to permit of peering in, and drew the dark curtains carefully down over each one. By this time 2 policemen had arrived, and Dr. Morgan, meeting them in the vestibule, was urging them for their own sakes to postpone entrance to the stench-filled reading room till the examiner came, and the prostrate thing could be covered up. Meanwhile, frightful changes were taking place on the floor. One need not describe the kind and rate of shrinkage and disintegration that occurred before the eyes of Dr. Armitage and Professor Rice, but it is permissible to say that, aside from the external appearance of face and hands, the really human element in Wilbur Whately must have been very small. When the medical examiner came, there was only a sticky, whitish mass on the painted boards, and the monstrous odor had nearly disappeared. Apparently Whately had had no skull or bony skeleton, at least in any true or stable sense. He had taken somewhat after his unknown father. Alrighty, well, that's the end of that chapter. We'll get back to it in just a minute. Let me catch up with chat. Alright, so Harry Parry came on in, said hi. Rose is, you just came in from the water hose time with the grandbaby. Ah! There we go. That sounds like a good time. We get the water sprinklers out. It's still in the 30s where Lady Death is. Wow, okay. I'm not sure what it is, but it's nice. It's nice outside. But, I mean, I know, I'm still not going out and about. Tell you what, the beaches down in Southern California, some of these... You know, last weekend, I think everyone thought to themselves, you know what, with everything on lockdown, I bet I'll be the only person at the beach. I don't know, and then I think maybe 50,000 people were thinking that exact same thing. Oh, lordy, we're all gonna die. All right. Okay. Let's see. Wow, Skip Donahue, good lord. Change my title. What's up with my title? What is my title? Oh, yeah, that one. Oh, yeah. All right, yeah. You're right. We're not reading The Happy Prince. Of course not. No, okay. The Dunwich Horror. It's always something. Always forgets. And normally Chris Alberti, he's normally on my case about that, but he's not here right now. All right. Thank you, Rose. Thank you. Did I put that? L. There we go. Okay, hey, there, this is the Dunwich Horror, part 2 of 2, to be precise. Oh, lordy. Okay, so Rose is listening while doing the dishes. All right, cool. Chef JT has a feeling Orange County and the beaches has more to do with the local political leanings and news sources. Maybe they have that reputation. They do. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I'm sure everyone saw the footage of that. I don't know. You know, I think the whole thing could have been over in like 2 or 3 weeks if everyone had just simultaneously, all at once, been like, okay, let's do it. But of course, it has not been like that. So yeah, the Rona is still making the rounds. All right. So okay, we'll get back to our story just a minute. Okay, so any more? Did I miss any more chat or anything like that? Oh yeah, so it's gonna say, So on Game Pass today, Streets of Rage 4 came out, but you have to go manually look for it because for whatever reason, if you're on a console, it's marked as Game Pass for PC only. It'll still let you install it as if you have Game Pass, but it's you actually literally have to search for it on your console, which kind of sucks for a release day. What else can we, what else we got? Did I see the Brad Pitt, oh yeah, you know, yeah, he did Dr. Fauci, which is really funny. Yeah, that's really funny because, like, Dr. Fauci, he got asked like a couple of weeks ago, just like, it was like one of the closing questions in some interview he was doing, that they were like, if you were to be, if any celebrity was to play you in a TV movie, who would you like it to be? And he was like, oh, I don't know, Brad Pitt. And then, yeah, 2 weeks later, Brad Pitt shows up doing his Dr. Fauci impression. I thought that was funny. Yeah, so that's actually why Brad Pitt was doing that. If it would have been, if he'd named any other celebrity, it would have been that one. So yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. Alrighty, okay. Let's see. Do we have any? Okay, we'll get on with our story. Let's do it. Actually, I just need to refresh a page here, see how well I'm doing on Mix's front page, if at all. I don't know. All right, let's see. What does it got? In the music and creative? No. I'm being outdone by... Well, okay. Yeah, we still got some 24/7s there. Oh, well. Good God. All right. I don't know. Makes no sense. All right. Okay. What? Level 5? What, level 5? What are you doing back? You're supposed to be in the hospital, dude. Maybe you are still in the hospital. Broken ribs. Man, you got messed up. Anyway, good morning, and thank you again there, level 5. Yeah, glad you could join us. That's I think that's like the 6th gift sub you've thrown down this week. You gotta be careful. You're gonna give out too many at some point. You actually might. There actually is a limit to how many you can do. So yeah, you went through surgery earlier. Yeah, I got your the thing earlier there. Anyway, I'm glad. I told you it would work out okay. I mean, obviously it sucks that you're in the hospital, but yeah, I mean, yeah. Once you're in the hospital, you're in good hands, and yeah, there you go. Just let them do their thing, and don't get into that kind of situation again. So yeah. Anyway, all right, okay. I saw him speak last fall about all the administrations he's worked for and the challenges they face. Oh, who knew what was coming? Wow. Yeah, Tillable Cat, don't get me started on that. Who knew something like this could happen? Who knew indeed? Yeah. So yeah, he boy, oh boy, yeah, it was. All right. Well, so he's out of action for like a little bit, but yeah. So that's unfortunate. Yeah. But yeah, well, now you're just forced to be able to take it easy for a while. There you go. It'll work out. And just get in the habit of being chill. I don't know. Anyway, all right. So yeah, okay. So yeah, he's on the mend. It'll take a while, but you're on the mend. There we go. And you got the seal of approval from the doctors and nurses. All right. Okay. Let's. But anyway, thank you again for that channel sub there, level 5. Very kind. You're gonna have a big scar on your side? Yeah, I don't know. You can just tell people you like were in the war or something. I don't know. No, don't do that, because then all the stolen valor people will come after you. Don't do that. Yeah, bad idea. Bad. Don't do that. Yeah. Very good. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, a book I can, actually, let me pull this up real fast. It'll have my Amazon link on it here. One sec. Amazon, one second. Is the, yeah, this one here. Bloop. This book right here, true story. It's about Ebola. And I remember there was a big Ebola scare not too long ago either. But this one right here, I mean, this is a bone-chilling true story about an Ebola outbreak, like back in it was like the late 80s or early 90s. The book was written in the mid 90s, so yeah, there was almost. Yeah, they made what was that movie? I think it was called Outbreak. They made a movie with Richard Gere and I forget who the woman was in there. But yeah, it was that was a very loose adaptation of this. But it's but yeah, anyway, but yeah, that book, The Hot Zone, it is so good. It is just like, and true story. So these things that they when they happen, they can happen fast. They can happen very fast. Thank goodness we have a pandemic response team. Oh, we don't. All right. Let's get on with our book. Here we go. Chapter 7. Yet all this was only the prologue of the actual Dunwich horror. Dustin Hoffman, thank you. Yes. I get Dustin Hoffman and Richard Gere mixed up all the time. Okay. Yet all this was the only prologue. Yet all this was only the prologue of the actual Dunwich horror. Formalities were gone through by bewildered officials, abnormal details were duly kept from press and public, and men were sent to Dunwich and Aylesbury to look up property and notify any who might be heirs of the late Wilbur Whately. They found the countryside in great agitation, both because of the growing rumblings beneath the domed hills, and because of the unwanted stench and the surging, lapping sounds, which came increasingly from the great, empty shell formed by Whately's boarded-up farmhouse. Earl Sawyer, who tended the horse and cattle during Wilbur's absence, had developed a woefully acute case of nerves. The officials devised excuses not to enter the noisome boarded place, and were glad to confine their survey of the deceased's living quarters, the newly mended sheds, to a single visit. How do we know when we start a new story? Well, Monday through Thursday is mainly novels. I'm just filling in with short stories. We start a brand new novel on Monday. And then on Sundays, it's all short stories all day on Sundays. I can talk more about it after the end of this chapter. They filed a ponderous report at the courthouse in Aylesbury, and litigations concerning heirship are said to be still in progress amongst the innumerable Whateleys, decayed and undecayed, of the upper Miskatonic Valley. An almost interminable manuscript in strange characters, written in a huge ledger and adjudged a sort of diary because of the spacing and the variations in ink and penmanship, presented a baffling puzzle to those who found it on the old bureau which served as its owner's desk. After a week of debate, it was sent to Miskatonic University, together with the deceased's collection of strange books, for study and possible translation. But even the best linguists soon saw that it was not likely to be unriddled with ease. No trace of the ancient gold with which Wilbur and old Whately always paid their debts has yet been discovered. It was in the dark of September 9th that the horror broke loose. The hill noises had been very pronounced during the evening, and dogs barked frantically all night. Early risers on the 10th noticed a peculiar stench in the air. About 7 o'clock, Luther Brown, the hired boy at George Corey's, between Cold Spring Glen and the village, rushed frenziedly back from his morning trip to 10-acre meadow with the cows. He was almost convulsed with fright as he stumbled into the kitchen, and in the yard outside the no less frightened herd were pawing and lowing pitifully, having followed the boy back in the panic they shared with him. Between gasps, Luther tried to stammer out his tale to Mrs. Corey.
"Up there in the rud beyond the glent, Miss Corey, there's something been there. It smells like thunder, and all the bushes and little trees is pushed back from the road like there's a house been moved along of it. And that ain't the worst, neither. There's prints in the road, Miss Corey, great round prints as big as barrel-heads, all sunk down deep like an elephant had been along. Only there's a sight more nor 4 feet could make. I looked at 1 or 2 afore I run, and I seen every one was covered with lines spreading out from one place like as if a big palm leaf fans, 2 or 3 times as big as any they is. He'd have been pounded down into the road, and the smell was awful, like what is around Wizard Whately's old house."
Here he faltered and seemed to shiver afresh with the fright that had sent him flying home. Miss Corey, unable to extract more information, began telephoning the neighbors, thus starting on its rounds the overture of panic that heralded the major terrors. When she got Sally Sawyer, housekeeper at Seth Bishop's, the nearest place to Whately's, it became her turn to listen instead of transmit, for Sally's boy, Chauncey, who slept poorly, had been up on the hill toward Whately's, and had dashed back in terror after one look at the place, and at the pasturage where Mr. Bishop's cows had been left out all night.
"Yes, Miss Corey," came Sally's tremulous voice over the party wire. "Chauncey's just come back from a posting, and couldn't have talk for being scared. He says old Whately's house is all blowed up, with the timbers scattered round like they'd been dynamite inside. Only the bottom floor ain't through, but is all covered with a kind of tar-like stuff that smells awful and drips down off in the edges into the ground wherein the side timbers is blown away. And there's awful kind of marks in the yard, too, great round marks, bigger round than a hogshead, and all sticky with stuff like is on the blowed-up house. Chauncey, he says they leads off into the meadows, where a great swath wider a barn is matted down, and all the stone walls tumbled every which way wherever it goes. And he says he, Miss Corey, as how he sought to look for Seth's cows, frightened as he was, and found 'em in the upper pasture nigh the Devil's Hop yard in an awful shape. Half's on 'em clean gone, and nigh half of them that's left is sucked most dry o' blood, with sores on 'em like there's been on Whately's cattle ever since Lavinia's black brat was born. Sethy's gone about now to look at 'em, though I'll vow he wa'n't cared to git very nigh Wizard Whately's. Chauncey didn't look careful to see where the big matted down swath led arter it left the pasturage, but he says he thinks it pinted towards the glen road to the village. I tell ye, Miss Corey, there's something abroad as hasn't been oughter be abroad, and I for one think that Black Wilbur Whately has come to the bad end he deserved, is at the bottom of the breeding of it. He wasn't all human himself, I always says to everybody. and I think he and old Whately must have raised something in that there nailed-up house as ain't even so human as he was. They allus been unseen things around Dunwich, living things as ain't human and ain't good for human folks. The ground was a-talking last night, and towards morning Chauncey he heard the whippoorwills so loud in Cold Spring Glen he couldn't sleep none. Then he thought he heard another faint-like sound over toward Wizard Whately's, a kind o' ripping or tearing o' wood, like some big box or crate was being opened for off. What with this and that, he didn't get to sleep at all till sun-up, and no sooner was he up this morning but he got to go over to Whately's and see what's the matter. He see enough, I tell ye, Miss Corey. This don't mean no good, and I think as all the men folks ought to get up a party and do something. I know something's awful about, and feel my time is nigh, though only God knows just what it is. Did your Luther take account of where them big trucks led to? No. Well, Miss Corey, if they was on the Glen Road, this side of the Glen, ain't got to your house yet. I calculate they must go into the Glen itself. They would do it. I allus says Cold Spring Glen ain't no healthy nor decent place. The whippoorwills and fireflies there never did act like they was creators of God, and there's them as says you can hear strange things a-rushing and a-talking in the air down there, if you stand in the right place, atween the Rock Falls and Bear's Den.
By that noon, fully 3/4 of the men and boys of Dunwich were trooping over the roads and meadows between the new-made Whately ruins and Cold Spring Glen, examining in horror the vast, monstrous prints, the maimed bishop cattle, the strange, noisome wreck of the farmhouse, and the bruised, matted vegetation of the fields and roadsides. Whatever had burst loose upon the world had assuredly gone down into the great, sinister ravine, for all the trees on the banks were bent and broken, and a great avenue had been gouged in the precipice-hanging underbrush. It was as though a house, launched by an avalanche, had slid down through the tangled growths of the almost vertical slope. From below no sound came, but only a distant, undefinable fetor. And it is not to be wondered at that the men preferred to stay on the edge and argue, rather than descend and beard the unknown cyclopean horror in its lair. 3 dogs that were with the party had barked furiously at first, but seemed cowed and reluctant when near the glen. Someone telephoned the news to the Aylesbury Transcript, but the editor, accustomed to wild tales from Dunwich, did no more than concoct a humorous paragraph about it, an item soon afterward reproduced by the Associated Press. That night everyone went home, and every house and barn was barricaded as stoutly as possible. Needless to say, no cattle were allowed to remain in open pasturage. About 2 in the morning, a frightful stench and the savage barking of the dogs awakened the household at Elmer Fry's, on the eastern edge of Cold Spring Glen, and all agreed that they could hear a sort of muffled swishing or lapping sound from somewhere outside. Mrs. Fry proposed telephoning the neighbors, and Elmer was about to agree when the noise of splintering wood burst in upon their deliberations. It came, apparently, from the barn, and was quickly followed by a hideous screaming and stamping amongst the cattle. The dogs slavered and crouched close to the feet of the fear-numbed family. Fry lit a lantern through force of habit, but knew it would be death to go out into that black farmyard. The children and womenfolk whimpered, kept their screaming kept from screaming by some obscure, vestigial instinct of defense which told them their lives depended on silence. At last the noise of the cattle subsided to a pitiful moaning, and a great snapping, crashing, and crackling ensued. The Frys, huddled together in the sitting-room, did not dare to move until the last echoes died away far down in Cold Spring Glen. Then, amidst the dismal moans from the stable and the demoniac piping of late whippoorwills in the glen, Selina Fry tottered to the telephone and spread what news she could of the second phase of horror. The next day, all the countryside was in a panic, and cowed, uncommunicative groups came and went where the fiendish thing had occurred. 2 titan swathes of destruction stretched from the glen to the Fry farmyard. Monstrous prints covered the bare patches of ground, and one side of the old red barn had completely caved in. Of the cattle, only a quarter could be found and identified. Some of these were in curious fragments, and all that survived had to be shot. Earl Sawyer suggested that help be asked from Aylesbury or Arkham, but others maintained it would be of no use. Old Zebulon Whately, of a branch that hovered about halfway between soundness and decadence, made darkly wild suggestions about rites that ought to be practiced on the hilltops. He came of a line where tradition ran strong, and his memories of chantings in the great stone circles were not altogether connected with Wilbur and his grandfather. Darkness fell upon a stricken countryside, too passive to organize for real defense. In a few cases, closely related families would band together and watch in the gloom under one roof. But in general, there was only a repetition of the barricading of the night before, and a futile, ineffective gesture of loading muskets and setting pitchforks handily about. Nothing, however, occurred except some hill noises. And when the day came, there were many who hoped that the new horror had gone as swiftly as it had come. There were even bold souls who proposed an offensive expedition down in the glen, though they did not venture to set an actual example to the still reluctant majority. When night came again, the barricading was repeated, though there was less huddling together of families. In the morning, both the Fry and the Seth Bishop households reported excitement among the dogs and vague sounds and stenches from afar, while early explorers noted with horror a fresh set of the monstrous tracks in the road skirting Sentinel Hill. As before, the sides of the road showed a bruising indicative of the blasphemously stupendous bulk of the horror, whilst the conformation of the tracks seemed to argue a passage in 2 directions, as if the moving mountain had come from Cold Spring Glen and returned to it along the same path. At the base of the hill, a 30-foot swathe of crushed shrubbery saplings led steeply upward, and the seekers gasped when they saw that even the most perpendicular places did not deflect the inexorable trail. Whatever the horror was, it could scale a sheer stony cliff of almost complete verticality. And as the investigators climbed around to the hill's summit by safer routes, they saw that the trail ended, or rather, reversed there. It was here that the Whateleys used to build their hellish fires and chant their hellish rituals by the table-like stone on May Eve and Hallowmass. Now that very stone formed the center of a vast space thrashed around by the mountainous horror, whilst upon its slightly concave surface was a thick and fetid deposit of the same tarry stickiness observed on the floor of the ruined Whately farmhouse when the horror escaped. Men looked at one another and muttered. Then they looked down the hill. Apparently the horror had descended by a route much the same as that of its ascent. To speculate was futile. Reason, logic, and normal ideas of motivation stood confounded. Only old Zebulon, who was not with the group, could have done justice to the situation, or suggested a plausible explanation. Thursday night began much like the others, but it ended less happily. The whippoorwills in the glen had screamed with such unusual persistence that many could not sleep, and at about 3 a.m. all the party telephones rang tremulously. Those who took down their receivers heard a fright-mad voice shriek out, "Help! Oh my God!" And some thought a crashing sound followed the breaking off of the exclamation. There was nothing more. No one dared to do anything, and no one knew till morning whence the call came. Then those who had heard it called everyone on the line, and found that only the Frys did not reply. The truth appeared an hour later, when a hastily assembled group of armed men trudged out to the Fry place at the head of the glen. It was horrible, yet hardly a surprise. There were more swathes and monstrous prints, but there was no longer any house. It had caved in like an eggshell, and amongst the ruins nothing living or dead could be discovered. Only a stench and a tarry stickiness. The Elmer Frys had been erased from Dunwich. Okay. In between chapters, let's catch up with chat. Yeah, okay, I told you things were going to escalate quickly. Yesterday was like that was all the slow burner background stuff going on right there. Now things are, they're a little tricky. A little tricky. Who's Beth? What's Beth? I don't know, Harry Munro. Okay, so it was Super Soldier. Super Soldier's here. What's up? What's up, Super Soldier? Okay, let's let's get back. Mr. D Beast has hooked us up with a follow. Well, thanks, man. That's cool. Rose is liking the voices. Okay. Oh yeah, I like playing them. Yeah. Okay, so D Beast came in and then left. Okay, that's cool. Andara hooked us up with a follow. Thank you, Andara. That's very kind. So now someone had a question. How do I know when the new books are? So they don't Jolt Freak. We got a follow from that as well. Was that Wilden? Oh yeah, Wilden says, how do we know when you're starting a new story? Okay, let me just change the scenes real fast. We'll continue in just 1 minute. Just 1 minute with our story, because it's going at a good clip right now. Anyway, so here's the scoop, Wilden. Monday through Thursday, we read novels. In fact, we've just finished The Lone Star Ranger by Zane Grey. That was a cowboy western. We've done dramas. We've done like science fiction. We've done horror. We've done classics. And they're all in the public domain too, because I can't afford good lawyers. So yeah, we stick with the public domain stuff, but there's no shortage of good public domain, that's for sure. So Monday through Thursday we start at 10 a.m. Pacific. I usually read for about 2 to 2.5 hours, and then I stop. Then the stream stops. Yeah, so Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific. That's 1 p.m. Eastern. Reading for about up to 2.5 hours. Then the stream stops, and I usually come back in the evening to stream some gaming and the like. And right now I'm having a lot of fun with Gears, Halo, and Phantasy Star Online. And Neverwinter on the weekends. On Sundays, we have Short Stories Sunday, which is short stories. Also, if anyone happens to be a creative writer and has a piece that they have written that they would like to share, I'm always happy to read what you have written here. Keeping in mind that it's a family-friendly channel, so it can't be too wild. Leave your homages to 50 Shades out of it. And then we have movie night later on Sundays as well. But anyway, yeah, the main book stream is Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I hope that answered your question. Oh, so brand new book starts on Monday. Brand new novel. I don't know what it is yet, but I have some suggestions. We'll figure it out. But yeah, we'll get on with it. I have not picked it out, Rose. I have not picked it out. I got a couple of different things in mind. I'd like it to be after that Western. I'd like some, I don't know, some real slappy, fast-moving science fiction, like very pulp sci-fi. I think it would be cool. Well, actually, when was the original Flash Gordon books written? Wiki, Flash Gordon book. It would have been serialized from the comic. Oh wow, those weren't even published till 1934. Oh, Buck Rogers was earlier though. Buck Rogers came before Flash Gordon. Interesting. All right. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I got the weekend to think about it. We'll come up with something fun. Yeah. Very cool. Oh, and yeah, and most of the gaming in the evening is usually some kind of multiplayer. Because I kind of like that. Anyway, let's get on with our story. Let's do it. Book screen. Here we go. Very cool. You're welcome, Wilder. Okay, one second. Here we go. Oh. Okay, now we're good. Okay. Wow, the FTL is not doing too well today at all, is it? Okay. FTL is terrible right now. Okay. I'm just taking a quick peek at Mix's front page, and... Alright. Let us... I'm trying to find my Mixer page now. Let's see if I can just refresh this to get it to get the FTL kicking back in. That'd be nice. Just seems like it's not working today for whatever reason. It's okay. We don't need no stinking FTL. Oh, by the way, I'm starting Phantasy Star Online early tonight. If anyone wants to. I'm on ship 2. On ship 2. All right. Let us get on with it. Chapter 8. In the meantime, a quieter yet even more spiritually poignant phase of the horror had begun blackly unwinding itself behind the closed door of a shelf-lined room in Arkham. The curious manuscript record or diary of Wilbur Whately, delivered to Miskatonic University for translation, had caused much worry and bafflement among the experts in languages, both ancient and modern. Its very alphabet, notwithstanding a general resemblance to the heavily shaded Arabic used in Mesopotamia, being absolutely unknown to any available authority. The final conclusion of the linguists was that the text represented an artificial alphabet, giving the effect of a cipher, though none of the usual methods of cryptographic solution seemed to furnish any clue, even when applied on the basis of every tongue the writer might conceivably have used. The ancient books, taken from Whately's quarters, while absorbingly interesting and in several cases promising to open up new and terrible lines of research among philosophers and men of science, were of no assistance whatever in this matter. One of them, a heavy tome with an iron clasp, was in another unknown alphabet, this one of a very different cast, and resembling Sanskrit more than anything else. The old ledger was at length given wholly into the charge of Dr. Armitage, both because of his peculiar interest in the Whately matter, and because of his wide linguistic learning and skill in the mystical formulae of antiquity and the Middle Ages. Armitage had an idea that the alphabet might be something esoterically used by certain forbidden cults which have come down from old times, and which have inherited many forms and traditions from the wizards of the Saracenic world. There we go. Yeah, that's the Moonhound. That is a reserved command for channel subscribers. But there we go. There you go. Let's do it. Let's do it. Armitage had an idea that the alphabet might be something esoterically used by certain forbidden cults which have come down from old times, and which have inherited many forms and traditions from the wizards of the Saracenic world. That question, however, he did not deem vital, since it would be unnecessary to know the origin of the symbols, if, as he suspected, they were used as a cipher in a modern language. It was his belief that, considering the great amount of text involved, the writer would scarcely have wished the trouble of using another speech than his own, save perhaps in certain special formulae and incantations. Accordingly, he attacked the manuscript with the preliminary assumption that the bulk of it was in English. Dr. Armitage knew from the repeated failures of his colleagues that the riddle was a deep and complex one, and that no simple mode of solution could merit even a trial. All through late August he fortified himself with the massed lore of cryptography, drawing upon the fullest resources of his own library, and wading night after night amidst the arcana of Trithemius's Polygraphia, Giambattista's Porters de Furtivis Litterarium Notis, de Vigenaire's Trait de Chiffre, Falconer's Cryptomenesis Patefacta, Davies and Thickness's 18th century treatises, and such fairly modern authorities as Blair, von Marten, and Kluber's Cryptographic. He interspersed his study of the books with attacks on the manuscript itself, and in time became convinced that he had to deal with one of the subtlest and most ingenious of cryptograms, in which many separate lists of corresponding letters are arranged like the multiplication table, and the message built up with arbitrary keywords known only to the initiated. The older authorities seemed rather more helpful than the newer ones, and Armitage concluded that the code of the manuscript was one of great antiquity, no doubt handed down through a long line of mystical experimenters. Several times he seemed near daylight, only to be set back by some unforeseen obstacle. Then, as September approached, the clouds began to clear. Certain letters, as used in certain parts of the manuscript, emerged definitely and unmistakably, and it became obvious that the text was indeed in English. Yeah, that got pretty tricky pretty fast there, Death by Snoo. Did indeed. Some of the Edgar Allan Poe stuff that gets diabolical real fast too when it starts going half French. That's just for no reason. Okay. On the evening of September 2nd, the last major barrier gave way, and Dr. Armitage read for the first time a continuous passage of Wilbur Whately's annals. It was, in truth, a diary, as all had thought, and it was couched in a style clearly showing the mixed occult erudition and general illiteracy of the strange being who wrote it. Almost the first long passage that Armitage deciphered, an entry dated November 26, 1916, proved highly startling and disquieting. It was written, he remembered, by a child of 3.5, who looked like a lad of 12 or 13. "Today learned the Aklo for the Sabbath," it ran, "which did not like, it being answerable from the hill, and not from the air, that upstairs more ahead of me than I had thought it would be, and is not like to have much earth brain. Shot Elam Hutchins' collie, Jack, when he went to bite me, and Elam says he would kill me if he dashed. I guess he won't. Grandfather kept me saying the dough formula last night, and I think I saw the inner city at the 2 magnetic poles. I shall go to those poles when the earth is cleared off, if I can't break through with the dough formula when I commit it. They from the air told me at Sabbat that it will be years before I can clear off the earth, and I guess Grandfather will be dead then. So I shall have to learn all the angles of the planes, and all the formulas between the ear and the ng. They from outside will help, but they cannot take body without human blood. That upstairs looks like it will have the right cast. I can see it a little when I make the Voorish sign, or blow the powder of Ngazi at it. And it is near like them at May Eve on the hill. The other face may wear off some. I wonder how I shall look when the earth is cleared and there are no earth beings on it. He that came with the Aklo Sabaoth said I may be transfigured, there being much of outside to work on." Morning found Dr. Armitage in a cold sweat of terror and a frenzy of wakeful concentration. He had not left the manuscript all night, but sat at his table, under the electric light, turning page after page with shaking hands, as fast as he could decipher the cryptic text. He had nervously telephoned his wife he would not be home, and when she brought him a breakfast from the house, he could scarcely dispose of a mouthful. All that day he read on, now and then halted maddeningly as a reapplication of the complex key became necessary. Lunch and dinner were brought him, but he ate only the smallest fraction of either. Toward the middle of the next night, he drowsed off in his chair, but soon woke out of a tangle of nightmares almost as hideous as the truths and menaces to man's existence that he had uncovered. On the morning of September 4th, Professor Rice and Dr. Morgan insisted on seeing him for a while, and departed, trembling and ashen-gray. That evening he went to bed, but slept only fitfully. Wednesday, the next day, he was back at the manuscript and began to take copious notes both from the current sections and from those he had already deciphered. In the small hours of that night he slept a little in an easy chair in his office, but was at the manuscript again before dawn. Some time before noon, his physician, Dr. Hartwell, called to see him and insisted that he cease work. He refused, intimating that it was of the most vital importance for him to complete the reading of the diary, and promising an explanation in due course of time. Got someone on YouTube. Any fighting fantasy books? Not right now. Not right now, but yeah, I do like them. I do like them, that's for sure. Got someone watching on YouTube. That's always exciting. That evening, just as twilight fell, he finished his terrible perusal and sank back exhausted. His wife, bringing his dinner, found him in a half-comatose state, but he was conscious enough to warn her off with a sharp cry when he saw her eyes wander toward the notes he had taken. Weakly rising, he gathered up the scribbled papers and sealed them all in a great envelope, which he immediately placed in his inside coat pocket. He had sufficient strength to get home, but was so clearly in need of medical aid that Dr. Hartwell was summoned at once. As the doctor put him to bed, he could only mutter over and over, "But what in God's name can we do?" Dr. Armitage slept, but was partly delirious the next day. He made no explanations to Hartwell, but in his calmer moments spoke of the imperative need of a long conference with Rice and Morgan. His wilder wanderings were very startling indeed, including frantic appeals that something in a boarded-up farmhouse be destroyed, and fantastic references to some plan for the extirpation of the entire human race, and all animal and vegetable life from the earth, by some terrible elder race of beings from another dimension. He would shout that the world was in danger, since the elder things wished to strip it and drag it away from the solar system and cosmos of matter into some other plane or phase of entity from which it had once fallen, vigintillions of eons ago. Is that Bastos? At other times he would call for the dreaded Necronomicon and the Demonolatreia of Remigius, in which he seemed hopeful of finding some formula to check the peril he conjured up. "Stop them! Stop them!" he would shout. "Those Whateleys mean to let them in, and the worst of all is left. Tell Rice and Morgan we must do something. It's a blind business, but I know how to make the powder. It hasn't been fed since the 2nd of August, when Wilbur came here to his death, and at that rate—" But Armitage had a sound physique, despite his 73 years, and slept off his disorder that night without developing any real fever. He woke late Friday, clear of head, though sober, with a gnawing fear and tremendous sense of responsibility. Saturday afternoon he felt able to go over to the library and summon Rice and Morgan for a conference, and the rest of that day and evening the three men tortured their brains in the wildest speculation and the most desperate debate. Strange and terrible books were drawn voluminously from the stacked shelves and from secure places of storage, and diagrams and formulae were copied with feverish haste and in bewildering abundance. Of skepticism there was none. All three had seen the body of Wilbur Whately as it lay on the floor in a room of that very building, and after that not one of them could feel even slightly inclined to treat the diary as a madman's ravings. Opinions were divided as to notifying the Massachusetts State Police, and the negative finally won. There were things involved which simply could not be believed by those who had not seen a sample, as indeed was made clear during certain subsequent investigations. Late at night the conference disbanded without having developed a definite plan. But all day Sunday Armitage was busy comparing formulae and mixing chemicals obtained from the college laboratory. The more he reflected on the hellish diary, the more he was inclined to doubt the efficacy of any material agent in stamping out the entity which Wilbur Whately had left behind him. The earth-threatening entity which, unknown to him, was to burst forth in a few hours and become the memorable Dunwich horror. Monday was a repetition of Sunday, with Dr. Armitage, for the task in hand, required an infinity of research and experiment. Further consultations of the monstrous diary brought about various changes of plan, and he knew that even in the end a large amount of uncertainty must remain. By Tuesday, he had a definite line of action mapped out, and believed he would try a trip to Dunwich within a week. Then, on Wednesday, the great shock came. Tucked obscurely away in a corner of the Arkham Advertiser was a facetious little item from the Associated Press, telling what a record-breaking monster the bootleg whiskey of Dunwich had raised up. Armitage, half stunned, could only telephone for Rice and Morgan. Far into the night they discussed, and the next day was a whirlwind of preparation on the part of them all. Armitage knew he would be meddling with terrible powers, yet saw there was no other way to annul the deeper and more malign meddling which others had done before him. Ooh, okay, getting heavy now. Okay, so all the newspapers are just like, it's a hoax. They're all just drunk on bootleg whiskey up in them Miskatonic Mountains, in the Miskatonic Valley. No one believes what's going on. Then when that happens, when you got something terrible happening and someone just says, it's just a hoax. Yeah. That does not lead to good things. Okay, just going to take a little thing here. Okay, we've still got chapters to go. Looks like we might be running a little over time tonight, but that's okay. It's okay. I'm happy to spend extra time with y'all. Get our story finished. Let's see, where we at? Unbelievable. Okay. Let us, Oh, so thank you for the new follows, by the way. So Mr. Basto 80 hooked us up with a follow. I might have missed a couple more. I do appreciate those. For those who might not know, yeah, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. That's our main book club. Monday through Thursday, which means tomorrow's Friday. Friday and Saturday, there's no book club. I'm just putting that right out there. However, there's extra gaming. And that's in the afternoon, so it's good. Okay, let's see. Moonhound. Moonhound was trying to get the Battle Royales going. We can do another one. Okay, Death by Snoo Snoo is sucked in. Okay, cool. Oh, very nice. We have a good time with it. I do this so I can practice my cold reading and improvisation skills and voice acting. So that's why I do this. It's practice for me, and I'm just very happy that other people enjoy it as we go. And we often fudge it up too, because it's all done on the fly. So sometimes, So Klaus is joining us. Okay, Klaus is here for the end. Okay, Klaus was waiting till the coast was clear before coming on in. That's okay. There's more Dunwich horror to come. Don't you worry. The coast is not clear yet. Alrighty. I think we've got one, maybe two more chapters to go, and we're going to get right on with them. As soon as one more sip of coffee. Tell you what, yeah, 2 hours of reading there, it gets a little rough. Mrs. Shadowtronic has a good time here. I like it too. I like sharing what I can do with y'all. There, who won that one? Oh, Will won that one. Nice. There we go. We'll take that. Take that, Wilden. Alrighty, okay, let's get back on with our book. Okay, here we go. Wilden won the Battle Royale. Okay. Chapter 9. Friday morning, Armitage, Rice, and Morgan set out by motor car, for Dunwich, arriving at the village about 1 in the afternoon. The day was pleasant, but even in the brightest sunlight a kind of quiet dread and portent seemed to hover about the strangely domed hills and the deep, shadowy ravines of the stricken region. Now and then, on some mountain top, a gaunt circle of stones could be glimpsed against the sky. From the air of hushed fright at Osborne's store, they knew something hideous had happened, and soon learned of the annihilation of the Elmer Fry house and family. Throughout that afternoon they rode around Dunwich, questioning the natives concerning all that had occurred, and seeing for themselves with rising pangs of horror the drear Fry ruins, with their lingering traces of the tarry stickiness, the blasphemous tracks in the Fry yard, the wounded Seth Bishop cattle, and the enormous swathes of disturbed vegetation in various places. The trail up and down Sentinel Hill seemed to Armitage of almost cataclysmic significance, and he looked long at the sinister, altar-like stone on the summit. At length the visitors, apprised of a party of state police which had come from Aylesbury that morning in response to the first telephone reports of the Fry tragedy, decided to seek out the officers and compare notes as far as practical. This, however, they found more easily planned than performed, since no sign of the party could be found in any direction. There had been 5 of them in a car, but now the car stood empty near the ruins in the Fry yard. The natives, all of whom had talked with the policeman, seemed at first as perplexed as Armitage and his companions. Then old Sam Hutchins thought of something and turned pale, nudging Fred Farr and pointing to the dank, deep hollow that yawned close by. "God!" he gasped. "I telled him not to go down into the glen, and I never thought nobody'd do it, with them tracks and that smell and the whippoorwills a-screeching down there in the dark o' noonday." A cold shudder ran through natives and visitors alike, and every ear seemed strained in a kind of instinctive, unconscious listening. Armitage, now that he had actually come upon the horror and its monstrous work, trembled with the responsibility he felt to be his. Night would soon fall, and it was then that the mountainous blasphemy lumbered upon its eldritch course. Negotium perambulans in tenebris. The old librarian rehearsed the formulae he had memorized, and clutched the paper containing the alternative one he had not memorized. He saw that his electric flashlight was in working order. Rice, beside him, took from a valise a metal sprayer of the sort used in combating insects, whilst Morgan uncased the big-game rifle on which he'd relied despite his colleagues' warnings that no material weapon would be of help. I don't think there's we'll just answer this real fast. Klaus is wanting to know what books entered the public domain this year or what's coming next year. Well, I can tell you, this year, So Big by Edna Ferber entered the public domain, because we read that on Public Domain Day, which is January 1st every year. So, this year, on January 1st, everything published in 1924 fell into the public domain. On January 1st of the upcoming year, January 1st, 2021, at the end of this year, everything that was published in 1925 will be falling into the public domain. And usually towards the end of the year, like the various blog websites start like making like lists of hot books and stuff like that to look forward to. But yeah, there's a lot of there will be a lot of good stuff. But yeah, if you look for books published in 1925, if you like put together like some search query with that in it there, you'll be good to go. You'll find a lot of books, ton of books. And if you're looking for a good depository of public domain books here, this one here, Gutenberg.org, they keep a pretty decent archive, a growing archive When they first started, a lot of their proofreading and stuff was pretty terrible. But in recent years, like the more recent the books are that are going in, the better and better the proofreading and formatting of their editions has become. But yeah, if you pick up something that's been there a long time, it's kind of dodgy. But it's a lot better now. Yeah. So right now, so currently, if it was published in 1924 or earlier, it's 100% in the public domain. On January 1st. Upcoming, everything in 1925 and earlier is 100% in the public domain books. If it's from 1925 to 1977, most likely it's still copyright. However, there's a ton of stuff, usually through magazines, which fell into the public domain because they had different rules. And after 1978, just forget about it. Yeah, so there's a little wiggle room from 1925 to 1977, I think it is. So I'd say like 90% copyrighted, 10% chance of it having like the publishing companies messing up the paperwork. All right. But yeah, right. Yeah. So, but yeah, just if you want 100%, just knowing you're in the clear right now, 1924 and earlier. Okay, let's get back to our book. I lost my book. Yes, well, we've done a couple of Agatha Christie books, yeah. So someone bought a metal sprayer used to combat insects. Morgan's brought the big rifle, and everyone said that's going to be no help. Armitage, having read the hideous diary, knew painfully well what kind of a manifestation to expect, but he did not add to the fright of the Dunwich people by giving any hints or clues. He hoped that it might be conquered without any revelation to the world of the monstrous thing it had escaped. As the shadows gathered, the natives commenced to disperse homeward, anxious to bar themselves indoors, despite the present evidence that all human locks and bolts were useless before a force that could bend trees and crush houses when it chose. They shook their heads at the visitors' plan to stand guard at the Fry ruins near the glen, and as they left, had little expectancy of ever seeing the watchers again. There were rumblings under the hills that night, and the whippoorwills piped threateningly. Once in a while, a wind, sweeping up out of Cold Spring Glen, would bring a touch of ineffable theatre to the heavy night air, such a theatre as all three of the watchers had smelled once before, when they stood above a dying thing that had passed for 15 years and a half as a human being. But the looked-for terror did not appear. Whatever was down there in the glen was biding its time, and Armitage told his colleagues it would be suicidal to try to attack it in the dark. Morning came wanly, and the night sounds ceased. It was a grey, bleak day, with now and then a drizzle of rain, and heavier clouds seemed to be piling themselves up beyond the hills to the northwest. The men from Arkham were undecided what to do. Seeking shelter from the increasing rainfall beneath one of the few undestroyed Fry outbuildings, they debated the wisdom of waiting, or of taking the aggressive and going down into the glen in quest of their nameless, monstrous quarry. The downpour waxed in heaviness, and distant peals of thunder sounded from far horizons. Sheet lightning shimmered, and then a forky bolt flashed near at hand, as if descending into the accursed glen itself. The sky grew very dark, and the watchers hoped that the storm would prove a short, sharp one, followed by clear weather. It was still gruesomely dark when, not much over an hour later, a confused babble of voices sounded down the road. Another moment brought to view a frightened group of more than a dozen men, running, shouting, and even whimpering hysterically. Someone in the lead began sobbing out words, and the Arkham men started violently when those words developed a coherent form.
"Oh, my God, the voice choked out. "It's a-going again, this time by day. It's out about moving this very minute, and only the Lord knows when it'll be on us all."
The speaker panted into silence, but another took up his message. "Nigh on an hour ago, Zeb Whately here heard the phone a-ringing, and it was Miss Corey, George's wife, that lives down by the junction. As he says the hired boy Luther was out driving in the cows from the storm out into the big bolt when he sees all the trees a-bending at the mouth of the glen, opposite side to this, and smelt the same awful smell like he smelt when he found the big tracks last Monday morning. And she says he was a swishing, lapping sound, more nor what the bending trees and bushes could make. And all of a sudden the trees along the road began to git pushed one side, and there was a awful stomping and splashing in the mud. But mind you, Luther, he didn't see nothing at all, only just the bending trees and underbrush. Then fur ahead, where Bishop's Brook goes, under the road, he heard a awful creaking and straining on the bridge, and says he could tell a sound of wood a-starting to crack and split. And all the whiles he never see a thing, only them trees and bushes a-bending. And when the swishing sound got very fur off, on the road toward Wizard Whately's and Sentinel Hill, Luther, he had the guts to step up when he heard it first and look at the ground. It was all mud and water, and the sky was dark, and the rain was wiping out all the tracks about as fast as could be. But beginning at the glen mouth, where the trees had moved, there was still some of them awful big prints, big as a barrels, like he's seen 'em Monday." At this point, the first excited speaker interrupted. "But that ain't the trouble now. That was only the start. Zeb here was calling folks up, and everybody was a-listening in when a call from Seth Bishop's cut in. His housekeeper Sally was carrying on fit to kill. She'd just see the trees a-bending beside the road, and says there was a kind of mushy sound, like a elephant puffing and treading, a-heading for the house. Then she spoke up, and sudden of a fearful smell, and says her boy Chancey was a-screaming as how it was just like what he smelt up at the Whately's, Rewin's Monday morning, and the dogs was all barking and whining awful. And then she let out a terrible yell, and says the shed down the road has just caved in like the storm had blowed it over, only the wind wasn't strong enough to do that. Everyone was a-listening, and we could hear lots of folks on the wire a-gasping. All to onct, Sally she yelled again, and says the front yard picket fence just crumpled up, though there wasn't no sign of what it had done. Then everybody on the line could hear Chancey and old Seth Bishop a-yelling too, and Sally was shrieking out that something heavy had struck the house, not lightning nor nothing, but something heavy against the front that kept a-launching itself again and again, though you couldn't see nothing out the front windows. And then... Lines of fright deepened on every face, and Armitage, shaken as he was, had barely poise enough to prompt the speaker. "And then Sally, she yelled out, 'Oh, help, the house is a-caving in,' and on the wire we could hear a terrible crashing and a whole flock of screaming, just like when Elmer Fry's place was took, only was—" The man paused, and another of the crowd spoke. "Oh, that's all. Not a sound nor squeak over the phone arter that. Just still like. We heard that it got out Fords and wagons and rounded up as many abled men-folks as we could get at Corey's place, and come up here to see what you thought was best to do. Not but what I think it's the Lord's judgment for our iniquities that no mortal kin ever set aside." Armitage saw that the time for positive action had come, and spoke decisively to the faltering group of frightened rustics. That was, woo! Yeah. That was, I heard the alarm go off. I'm just backing up a bit here. One second. The big alarm. That was music. I think it was music AMR. Music AMR, I believe. I'm just trying to catch up on our track here. L-Docs gave us a follow. Nice, nice. Music AMR, there we go. It was Music AMR. Thank you. Well, we had some of your friends come into the stream last night, Music AMR. Yeah, they're very cool. We were doing some Phantasy Star online too. They just came and chilled for a bit. Thank you for that gift sub to Mr. Boomin. Mr. Boomin, there we go. Nice. Thank you. I do got to get back to my story. Let's give Mr. Music AMR a nice shout out if we could, please. But we got to get back to our thing here. Armitage saw that the time for positive action had come and spoke decisively to the faltering group of frightened rustics. We must follow it, boys. He made his voice as reassuring as possible. I believe there's a chance of putting it out of business. You men know that those Whateleys were wizards. Well, this thing is a thing of wizardry and must be put down by the same means. I've seen Wilbur Whately's diary and read some of the strange old books he used to read, and I think I know the right kind of spell to recite to make the thing fade away. Of course, one can't be sure, but we can always take a chance. It's invisible. I knew it would be. But there's a powder in this long-distance sprayer that might make it show up for a second. Later on we'll try it. It's a frightful thing to have alive, but it isn't as bad as what Wilbur would have let in if he'd lived longer. You'll never know what the world has escaped. Now we've only this one thing to fight, and it can't multiply. It can, though, do a lot of harm, so we mustn't hesitate to rid the community of it. We must follow it, and the way to begin is to go to the place that has just been wrecked. Let somebody lead the way. I don't know your roads very well, but to have an idea there might be a shorter cut across lots. How about it? The men shuffled about a moment. Then Earl Sawyer spoke softly, pointing with a grimy finger through the steadily lessening rain. I guess you can get to Seth Bishop's quickest by cutting across the lower meadow here, wading the brook at the low place, and climbing through Carrier's Mowen and the timber lot beyond. That comes out on the upper road mighty nigh Seth's, a little t'other side. Armitage, with Rice and Morgan, started to walk in the direction indicated, and most of the natives followed. Slowly. The sky was growing lighter, and there were signs that the storm had worn itself away. When Armitage inadvertently took a wrong direction, Joe Osborne warned him and walked ahead to show the right one. Courage and confidence were mounting, though the twilight of the almost perpendicular wooded hill which lay toward the end of their shortcut, and among whose fantastic ancient trees they had to scramble as if up a ladder, put these qualities to a severe test. At length they emerged on a muddy road to find the sun coming out. They were a little beyond the Seth Bishop place, but bent trees and hideous, unmistakable tracks showed what had passed by. Only a few moments were consumed in surveying the ruins just around the bend. It was the Fry incident all over again, and nothing dead or living was found in either of the collapsed shells which had been the Bishop house and barn. No one cared to remain there amidst the stench and tarry stickiness, but all turned instinctively to the line of horrible prints leading on toward the wrecked Whately farmhouse and the altar-crowned slopes of Sentinel Hill. As the men passed the site of Wilbur Whately's abode, they shuddered visibly, and seemed again to mix hesitancy with their zeal. It was no joke tracking down something as big as a house that no one could see, but that had all the vicious malevolence of a demon. Opposite the base of Sentinel Hill, the tracks left the road, and there was a fresh bending and matting visible along the broad swathe, marking the monster's former route to and from the summit. Armitage produced a pocket telescope of considerable power and scanned the steep green side of the hill. Then he handed the instrument to Morgan, whose sight was keener. After a moment of gazing, Morgan cried out sharply, passing the glass to Earl Sawyer and indicating a certain spot on the slope with his finger. Sawyer, as clumsy as most non-users of optical devices are, fumbled a while, but eventually focused the lenses with Armitage's aid. When he did so, his cry was less restrained than Morgan's had been. "God almighty! The grass and bushes is a-movin'. It's a-goin' up, slow-like, creepin' up to the top this minute. Heaven only knows what for." Then the germ of panic seemed to spread among the seekers. It was one thing to chase the nameless entity, but quite another to find it. Spells might be all right, but suppose they weren't? Voices began questioning Armitage about what he knew of the thing, and no reply seemed quite to satisfy. Everyone seemed to feel himself in close proximity to phases of nature, and of being utterly forbidden, and wholly outside the sane experience of mankind. One chapter to go. One chapter to go. We got it. We got it. Anyway, it's very nice to see Music AMR. Always streaming with his beautiful wife, Cutie Cayenne. They tear it up. Good lord, they tear it up. I didn't know you did Minecraft, though, as well. Oh, are you looking forward to Minecraft Dungeons, by the way? Minecraft Dungeons comes out the end of May, and it's kind of like Gauntlet. You know the old elf is about to die. Warrior needs food badly. It kind of looks like that kind of thing, and you can have like up to 4 people, I think, like running around in these randomly generated dungeons there, but everything's all Minecraft. Anyways, yeah, you would probably really like that. Would probably be a big hit on your nighttime streams. Chris Alberti's looking forward to Minecraft Dungeons. Nice, very nice. Very nice. I am too, Chris. Is it crossplay? It probably is. I think it is. Yeah, it should be fun. Should be a lot of fun. Okay, I'm just having a little sip of water here before we get into our final chapter. It is. Wild Din's still here. We haven't frightened Wild Din off yet. Wilden. Or is it Wild YN? No, it's Wilden. The Dunwich horror is going down. Or maybe the party hunting it is about to go down. Oh, no. H.P. Lovecraft certainly wrote a lot of stories where the good guys don't always win. Yeah, I was kind of disappointed that that the most recent Gauntlet was PlayStation only. I love that game, and it looked really, really cool. And then they were like, "Oh, by the way, it was PlayStation 4 only." Oh, by the way, Streets of Rage 4 came out today. It's on Game Pass, but you have to manually go find it because whatever reason it's not showing up under. But it is out. It is out. You have to go manually look for it. Streets of Rage 4. It's going to be great. What? Level 5, lurking in the background, comes out from the lurk and throws down another gift sub. I'm losing track. That's 7, I think. Good gracious, you are on fire, level 5. The Bearded God, now a new member of the book club. It's very nice. Well, thank you. Thank you, level 5. Oh, by the way, let me just give a quick reminder, by the way, for those who don't know. If you link your Discord account to your Mixer account, that's how they synchronize, you will get access to a super secret section on Discord. And where I upload recordings which I've made, short stories which I've recorded in my studio, as well as there's a bunch of other audio recordings in there as well, a variety of ebooks and and archives of movies that we've watched on movie night in there, just in case anyone ever needs any of those. So yeah, if you're on Discord, that's where you can find them. But yeah, you need to go into your Mixer account and connect Discord from there. And that way Discord knows when to grant access. It's pretty sweet the way it works out. Okay, let's get back into our story. So thank you once again, level 5. All right, here's our book. Chapter 10. In the end, the 3 men from Arkham, old, white-bearded Dr. Armitage, stocky, iron-gray Professor Rice, and lean, youngish Dr. Morgan. See, all three, okay, these descriptions right here. Old, white-bearded Dr. Armitage, stocky, iron-gray Professor Rice, and lean, youngish Dr. Morgan. That would have been so useful to know back when I was first just like randomly assigning voices to all of these things. So, yeah, okay, so it's, yeah, but, yeah, here we are. Ascended the mountain, they ascended the mountain alone. Everyone else chickened out. After much patient instruction regarding its focusing and use, they left the telescope with the frightened group that remained in the road. And as they climbed, they were watched closely by those among whom the glass was passed around. It was hard going, and Armitage had to be helped more than once. High above the toiling group, the great swathe trembled as its hellish maker repassed with snail-like deliberateness. Then it was obvious that the pursuers were gaining. Curtis Whately of the undecayed branch was holding the telescope when the Arkham party detoured radically from the swathe. He told the crowd that the men were evidently trying to get to a subordinate peak which overlooked the swathe at a point considerably ahead of where the shrubbery was now bending. This indeed proved to be true, and the party was seen to gain the minor elevation only a short time after the invisible blasphemy had passed it. Then Wellesley Corey, who had taken the glass, cried out that Armitage was adjusting the sprayer, which Rice held, and that something must be about to happen. The crowd stirred uneasily, recalling that this sprayer was expected to give the unseen horror a moment of visibility. 2 or 3 men shut their eyes, but Curtis Whately snatched back the telescope and strained his vision to the utmost. He saw that Rice, from the party's point of vantage above and behind the entity, had an excellent chance of spreading the potent powder with marvelous effect. Those without the telescope saw only an instant's flash of gray cloud, a cloud about the size of a moderately large building, near the top of the mountain. Curtis, who had the instrument, dropped it with a piercing shriek into the ankle-deep mud on the road. He reeled and would have crumpled to the ground had not 2 or 3 others seized and steadied him. All he could do was moan, half inaudibly, "Oh, great God, that..." There was a pandemonium of questioning, and only Henry Wheeler thought to rescue the fallen telescope and wipe it clean of mud. Curtis was past all coherence, and even isolated replies were almost too much for him. "Bigger in a barn, all made of squirmin' ropes. Whole thing sort of shaped like a hen's egg, bigger 'n anything, with dozen of legs like hog's head that half shut up when they step. Nothing solid about it, all like jelly, and made of separate wriggling ropes pushed close together. Great bulging eyes all over it. 10 or 20 mouths or trunks are sticking out along the sides, big as stovepipes, and all a-tossing and opening and shutting. All gray, with kind of blue or purple rings. And God in heaven, that half-face on top." This final memory, whatever it was, proved too much for poor Curtis, and he collapsed completely before he could say more. Fred Farr and Will Hutchins carried him to the roadside and laid him on the damp grass. Henry Wheeler, trembling, turned the rescued telescope on the mountain to see what he might. Through the lenses were discernible 3 tiny figures, apparently running toward the summit as fast as the steep incline allowed. Only these. Nothing more. Then everyone noticed a strangely unseasonable noise in the deep valley behind, and even in the underbrush of Sentinel Hill itself. It was the piping of unnumbered whippoorwills, and in their shrill chorus there seemed to lurk a note of tense and evil expectancy. Earl Sawyer now took the telescope and reported the three figures as standing on the topmost ridge, virtually level with the altar stone, but at a considerable distance from it. One figure, he said, seemed to be raising its hands above its head at rhythmic intervals, and as Sawyer mentioned the circumstance, the crowd seemed to hear a faint, half-musical sound from the distance, as if a loud chant were accompanying the gestures. The weird silhouette on that remote peak must have been a spectacle of infinite grotesqueness and impressiveness, but no observer was in a mood for aesthetic appreciation.
"I guess he's saying the spell," whispered Wheeler as he snatched back the telescope.
The whippoorwills were piping wildly, and in a singularly curious, irregular rhythm, quite unlike that of the visible ritual. Suddenly the sunshine seemed to lessen without the intervention of any discernible cloud. It was a very peculiar phenomenon, and was plainly marked by all. A rumbling sound seemed brewing beneath the hills, mixed strangely with a concordant rumbling which clearly came from the sky. Lightning flashed aloft, and the wondering crowd looked in vain for the portents of a storm. The chanting of the men from Arkham now became unmistakable, and Wheeler saw through the glass that they were all raising their arms in the rhythmic incantation. From some farmhouse far away came the frantic barking of dogs. The change in the quality of the daylight increased, and the crowd gazed about the horizon in wonder. A purplish darkness, born of nothing more than a spectral deepening of the sky's blue, pressed down upon the rumbling hills. Then the lightning flashed again, somewhat brighter than before, and the crowd fancied that it had showed a certain mistiness around the altar stone on the distant height. "That's right, Grim Reaper's coming. Thank you, Tillable-Cat." No one, however, had been using the telescope at that instant. The whippoorwills continued their irregular pulsation, and the men of Dunwich braced themselves tensely against some imponderable menace with which the atmosphere seemed surcharged. Without warning came those deep, cracked, raucous vocal sounds which will never leave the memory of the stricken group who heard them. Not from any human throat were they born, for the organs of man can yield no such acoustic perversions. Rather, one would have said they came from the pit itself, had not their source been so unmistakably the altar stone on the peak. It is almost erroneous to call them sounds at all, since so much of their ghastly, infra-bass timbre spoke to dim seats of consciousness and terror, far subtler than the ear. Yet one must do so, since their form was indisputably, though vaguely, that of half-articulate words. They were loud as the rumblings and the thunder above which they echoed. Yet did they come from no visible being. And because imagination might suggest a conjectural source in the world of non-visible beings, the huddled crowd at the mountain's base huddled still closer, and winced, as if in expectation of a blow. "Nyai, nyai, thingflit nya, yogzothov," rang the hideous croaking out of space. "Think, yai, nigriglit." The speaking impulse seemed to falter here, as if some frightful psychic struggle were going on. Henry Wheeler strained his eye at the telescope, but saw only the three grotesquely silhouetted human figures on the peak, all moving their arms furiously in strange gestures as their incantation drew near its culmination. From what black wells of acherontic fear or feeling, from what unplumbed gulfs of extra-cosmic consciousness or obscure, long-latent heredity were those half-articulate thunder-croakings drawn? Presently, they began to gather renewed force and coherence as they grew in stark, utter, ultimate frenzy. Ya 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 ha ya 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 help Father young Sarthoth. But that was all. The pallid group in the road, still reeling at the indisputably English syllables that had poured thickly and thunderously down from the frantic vacancy beside that shocking altar stone, were never to hear such syllables again. Instead, they jumped violently at the terrific report which seemed to rend the hills. The deafening, cataclysmic peal, whose source, be it inner earth or sky, no hearer was ever able to place. A single lightning bolt shot from the purple zenith to the altar stone, and a great tidal wave of viewless force and indescribable stench swept down from the hill to all the countryside. Trees, grass, and underbrush were whipped into a fury, and the frightened crowd at the mountain's base, weakened by the lethal fetor that seemed about to asphyxiate them, were almost hurled off their feet. Dogs howled from the distance. Green grass and foliage wilted to a curious, sickly yellow, and over field and forest were scattered the bodies of dead whippoorwills. The stench left quickly, but the vegetation never came right again. To this day, there is something queer and unholy about the growths on and around that fearsome hill. Curtis Whately was only just regaining consciousness when the Arkham men came slowly down the mountain in the beams of a sunlight once more brilliant and untainted. They were grave and quiet, and seemed shaken by memories and reflections, even more terrible than those which had reduced the group of natives to a state of cowed quivering. In reply to a jumble of questions, they only shook their heads and reaffirmed one vital fact. "The thing is gone forever," Armitage said. "It has been split up into what it was originally made of, and can never exist again. It was an impossibility in a normal world. Only the least fraction was really matter in any sense we know. It was like its father, and most of it has gone back to him in some vague realm or dimension outside our material universe. Some vague abyss, out of which only the most accursed rites of human blasphemy could ever have called him for a moment on the hills." There was a brief silence, and in that pause the scattered senses of poor Curtis Whately began to knit back into a sort of continuity, so that he put his hands to his head with a moan. Memory seemed to pick itself up where it had left off, and the horror of the sight that had prostrated him burst in upon him again. Oh my God! That half-face! That half-face on top of it! That face with the red eyes and crinkly albino hair! And no chin, like the Whateleys. It was an octopus, a centipede, a spider kind of thing. But there was a half-shaped man's face on top of it, and it looked like Wizard Whately's, only it was yards and yards across. He paused, exhausted, as the whole group of natives stared in a bewilderment not quite crystallized into fresh terror. Only old Zebulon Whately, who wonderingly remembered ancient things, but who had been silent heretofore, spoke aloud. 15 year gone, he rambled. I heard old Whately say as how someday we'd hear a child, a Lavinies, a calling its father's name on the top of Sentinel Hill. But Joe Osborne interrupted him to question the Arkham men anew. What was it, anyhow? And however did young Wizard Whately call it out of the air it came from? Armitage chose his words very carefully. It was mostly a kind of force that doesn't belong in our part of space. A kind of force that acts and grows and shapes itself by other laws than those of our sort of nature. We have no business calling in such things from outside, and only very wicked people and very wicked cults ever try to. There was some of it in Wilbur Whately himself, enough to make a devil and a precocious monster of him, and to make his passing out a pretty terrible sight. I'm going to burn his accursed diary. And if you men are wise, you'll dynamite that altar stone up there, and pull down all the rings of standing stones on the other hills. Things like that brought down the beings those Whateleys were so fond of. The beings they were going to let in tangibly to wipe out the human race, and drag the earth off to some nameless place, for some nameless purpose. But as to this thing we've just sent back, the Whateleys raised it for a terrible part in the doings that were to come. It grew fast and big from the same reason that Wilbur grew fast and big. But it beat him because it had a greater share of the outsideness in it. You needn't ask how Wilbur called it out of the air. He didn't call it out. It was his twin brother, but it looked more like his father than he did. And that... I got a lot of catching up to do. That was the end of the Dunwich horror. And it looks like we had the Dream Hive came by. The Dream Hive came by. Sorry, I couldn't stop. I saw something going on. Had to stop. Couldn't stop. Unfortunately, we are about to stop. We went a little bit long today, huh? Oh boy, so we got oh boy. There we are. So we got super quiet Dream Hive raid. There we go. That's okay. That's what we're talking about. Very good. Sorry, I missed. Okay, let me say hi. All right. So Frogpunk is okay. My German's so old and rusty. I don't know. I'm not going to. I can't look all that up. Mr. Galen, thank you for coming by with all your friends. Thank you for coming by. Where we go? Level 5 is throwing down yet more of those gift subs. Good, I think that's 8. You like the story? It's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. It's pretty good. So yesterday was part 1. And we did part 2 today. So yeah, altogether it's about 4 hours to narrate that story. That's a long one. Oh boy. Yeah, it was nice meeting you, Death by Snoo Snoo. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, there's no story time on Friday and Saturday, by the way. Yeah, so the next book club is on Sunday. So Sunday's at a different time, by the way, 2 p.m. Pacific on Sunday. But yeah, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific. Yeah, we're doing good. What have you been doing, Mr. Galen? Mr. Galen, who does he does a great art stream. I saw you go live today, and you don't normally go live on a Thursday. But I guess if we're stuck at home, sure, why not? Oh, Final Fantasy VII-R. Okay, nice. How many times have you finished it now? Yeah, back in the day, Frag Punk. Back in the day, yeah, I studied languages. Yeah. Xbox May 7 game reveal. Yes, yeah, I saw that post. That tweet there. They're doing Xbox One Series X gameplay reveals next Thursday, May 7th. Gonna be interesting. You wonder if John Carpenter got his inspiration for the movie The Thing from this story. Maybe. I mean, Lovecraft has been like hugely influential. Like to all kinds of things. Actually, the bit with like the whole invisible thing and taking the sprayer out to make it show up. I don't know if anyone saw the film It Follows. It was about like 5 or 6 years ago. It was actually a very interesting film, and the first half of it was really good. And then it got silly because they basically end up like this. It turns out that the creature's not really this like just force like which goes around possessing people, but it's actually an invisible monster, which made no sense because like for the second half of the story. Yes, they do things like throwing things to make it show up there, throw a sheet over the top, and it just like can't get the sheet off. It's turned all silly, but it was a great movie. The first half of it, very cool, and that's what actually I was thinking of when I was reading this. Yeah, you learned to write it because you are German. Okay, nice. But yeah, there's just like the bizarre descriptions. I mean, I'm sure it's been adapted to. It's been a huge influence on basically everyone. I think any writer of horror who says Lovecraft, who's that? I think they're lying. Yeah, doing good. So you like the ending there, Rose? You like the ending? Okay, I'm glad you like that. I'm just backing up through chat, and I probably missed a lot. Death by Snoo is here. Okay, Chizara's here. Chizara coming on in. I'm not sure if we got cheese snacks waiting around, but yeah. Very good. Velociraptor, thank you for that, host. Good to see you. Yeah, that's Mr. Pew blowing up again, says Tilbucan. Okay. The super quiet raid, and I caught some embers out of the corner of my eye too. Except that's long gone. It might have been Tillable Cat, but it's already off the top of my thing there, and I'm reading that. But yeah, that was cool. Lovecraft's influence is pretty high in horror. Yes, it is. So that was cool. I really enjoyed that. And surprisingly, we've never read that before. Mainly because it's like 90 pages long. So yeah, it's just never conveniently fit into a time to read it. Yeah. So, but that is it. I'm afraid that is it. That is so I need to. Oh yeah. So yesterday I uploaded the intro to the Edgar Allan Poe Experience. It's in the cloud section of the super secret thing there. And as soon as the stream's over, well, I'm having breakfast/lunch, and then I'm getting I'm going to be editing back into editing the rest of it. So yeah, during the course of this week, a bunch of the stories are going to be popping in there. I'll be letting everyone. Yeah, Kaiser. Die Kaiser. Is cheese. Yeah. So Streets of Rage 4 is out. Make sure you get that. It's on Game Pass. Streets of Rage 4. You have to look for it because they bungled the whatever. It's just listed as Game Pass for PC only, but it's not. If you manually look it up on your console, you can download it straight to your via Game Pass. Don't have to buy it. And then later tonight, I'm starting Final Fantasy Star. It's going to be all Fantasy Star all night. I'm on ship 2, if anyone is getting on in there. Your whole life is a lie. What? But I do need to go. Thank you again, level 5. There was so many gift subs out there. Chillable Cat, just wanted to see what this ember is supposed to be. It's a couple of mangoes hugging a strawberry. I think that's supposed to be a strawberry, because mango strawberry does make for a good fruity cocktail. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Wow, and thank you, Shazara, as well. Yeah. Getting some last-minute embers in there. Maybe I'll stay a little longer. Yeah. So anyway, the intro to the Edgar Allan Poe project. It's in the cloud section of the Discord there. All the rest of the parts will be coming up in the upcoming week as I work my way through finishing up the editing and on that. You're welcome, Wilden. Oh, by the way, this Weird Tales thing that you see over to the side, that was the cover of that's the cover that this was originally first published in, Weird Tales, 1929. And it wasn't even listed as the main story on the front, even though the publisher of the magazine paid a fortune for this story. It was like the biggest paycheck at that time that Lovecraft had ever received, this particular story. He wasn't even sure. He was like, I don't know if anyone likes this. And then the publisher saw it and offered him like a fortune for it. And then published it in this, and it didn't even spend all that money on it, didn't even stick it on the front page. Anyway, so someone was asking about copyright earlier. So this particular story published, it was technically published in 1928, I think. I can look it up. I can look it up 1 second. Yeah, 1928. So but it's one of those things where it ends up being in the public domain because it was published in a magazine, and this, oh boy, more gift subs. Good lord. Okay, Lady Death is out of here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending time with us, making sure everyone doesn't get too wild. Thank you, Lady Death. Have an awesome weekend there. Have an awesome weekend. See if you can, I don't know, get some good gaming in too while you're at it. And boy, it'd be nice to not have to share the PC with the kids there too. I'm sure they don't need that for over the weekend. Yeah. So between up to like 1977 or 78. Like magazines and books that were published, they were given like a shorter copyright term, and then they could manually re-extend it for a similar amount of time, and that time kept getting longer and longer. So it started off, I think, at 7 years, and with the 7 years, and then 14 years and 14 years, 28 and 28. And so many of these magazines had either sloppy record keeping or went out of business that they had their original copyright term, and then for whatever reason, they never got around to re-extending it. And so a lot of this stuff fell into the public domain just because it was published in magazines. And, anyway, that's some stuff. Imagine forgetting to renew it. Yeah, well, I mean, that's how that movie that we... the movie that we watched last Sunday, Charade, with Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, that one fell into the public domain because at that time, you literally had to put the little copyright symbol in the opening or closing credits. Whoever was doing the optical titles blew it. And so as soon as it was shown publicly and it did not have that little copyright symbol on it, boom, into the public domain it went. Same thing happened to Night of the Living Dead, one of the most influential horror movies ever made. It basically invented the modern zombie. It's in the public domain because they forgot to put the little copyright symbol on it. Well, and it doesn't work like that anymore. But A lot of movies had that happen to it. There was that one space movie that we watched, Cosmos: War of the Planets. I think that one was one of the movies where they forgot to. Oh, hang on. We've done at least one movie where it was they because of the confusing language in it, they thought they were putting in the request for an additional 28 years of copyright protection, but just because of the way it was written, a lot of movies and books, they filed it one day after they were supposed to, one day after their cutoff deadline. And leaving it to the last minute is never a good idea anyway. But a lot of stuff fell into the public domain too because they filed it literally one day too late. It's crazy. Yeah. What's not showing up? I turned off the 500k spark button because it's already maxed out. And I know people want to come in and dump a whole bunch of stuff, but that's just it's a spark dump button, and there's no point to it, a spark dump button. But please feel free to use like all the regular sparky things to liven the stream up. But yeah, like tomorrow I'll be able to turn it back on for people who want to use it for that. But yeah, I don't want someone coming in and like thinking that they're being. I mean, of course it would be very generous, but if they dump 10 million sparks. Right now it's not going to do anything, at least in the purpose that they're hoping for, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So but yeah, don't let that stop you from like using up all the fun goofy stuff. Yeah, it'll be back on tomorrow. Tomorrow's the 1st, so yeah, every 2 weeks it gets reset. But yeah, it's just a bit, you guys are so generous, you like fill it up in a week now. It's crazy. It's very crazy. But here we go. What am I doing? I'm looking for. What am I looking? Where is let's see, who can we do? Who is okay, well, first of all, audience. Not wrong button. That's what I'm looking for. Who is MJ Tigger? MJ Tiger. I don't know. That's where we're going. We're going to MJ Tiger. They got a stream avatars thing too. All right. Yeah. So this is. Oh my lord.
Okay. Where's the hand?
All right. Well, they got all kinds of crazy music going. All right. This is. Let me just post a link to where we are going. So first of all, I just want to thank you for. Well, first of all, thank you for being here today, spending some time with us. I really appreciate that. It really makes my reading experience a lot more fulfilling. Even though, like, technically I'm just practicing. Practicing and improving my voice acting and narration skills in cold reading. It feels so good just to have getting feedback from an audience as I go. It's nice. Thank you all for the sparks there. Thank you for the embers. I see. I had to get rid of my other list because it wasn't counting things properly, so I don't have an actual roll credits, and it would be hugely inaccurate anyway. But I believe today was Rose. I think Tillable Cat. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. L.A. King's Lover. I think that was last night. And Chazara. There we go. Thank you for the embers. Thank you, Level 5, for all those gift subs. Thank you. I think Mr. Art by Galen threw down a gift sub as well. Thank you. Thank you for that. Do I ever read off stream? Not really, unless it's working. I mean, this it's yeah. Alrighty. So if I missed anyone, well, speak now. Forever hold your peace. I do thank you. So next book club is on Sunday. It's going to be Short Story Sunday, 2 p.m. Pacific, and then we have movie night later that night, and then we start a brand new novel on Monday. And it's going to be I don't know what it is. Yeah, Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific. It's going to be great. Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. So yeah, you heal up and stop getting into fights, dude. All right. Alrighty. So here we go. This is where we're going. This is where we're going, over to MJ Tigger. Oh, no, hang on. That didn't go. Let's do this. Here we go. MJ Tigger's where we're going. All right. And we will